want to read another message that came in. Top tip, take all the dates off your CV. Now, why are we talking about that? It says, well, you might be feeling at your peak at the age of 50, but maybe in the workplace you feel somewhat invisible, or do you feel you've been pushed out? My next two guests have been looking at this issue and also, which is very important, what you can do about it. There are more women than men that are not working in midlife. That's according to government figures. So it's nearly a third of women aged 50 to 64 compared to just over a fifth of men. Of course, we don't know what the choices are behind that, whether it's a choice or a decision, or in fact is that they can't find the work that they want. Eleanor Mills runs a website called Noon for women in midlife. Research carried out for the website shows nearly half of women aged 45 to 60 feel invisible. Good morning, Eleanor. You're very visible to me this morning.
Thanks, nice to be here.
And we have Lucy Standing, a writer who thinks your 50s could be the most powerful decade of your working life. She argues this in a book she's co-authored. It's out this month, called Age Against the Machine, New Rules for Working in an Ageist World. Good morning, Lucy.
Morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I read a column in the paper when I was just researching into women in midlife in work, and it said employers often prefer cheaper, younger staff they can mould from scratch. Isn't pretending otherwise simply denial? What say you?
Rather than pretending, why not go out and start asking people? Because that's the sort of research that we do, and that's certainly my experience. As people get older, very, very many of them, it's learning something new, wanting to make a change is third on their list of things that they're happy to do. And are they ready and are they willing to accept a pay cut in order to do that? Absolutely they are. So it's not the lived experience of very, very many of the people that I work with.
It's not the lived experience that employers often prefer cheaper, younger staff?
I think employers are just not experimenting. So I don't think they really know. I can point to hundreds of graduate schemes and apprenticeship schemes targeted at younger people. How many schemes can you point at that say, hey, let's retrain all these people in their 40s and 50s and look at that data? And if they were to start doing some of that, they would be blown away by how impressive they would find this demographic.
There are the returnerships, of course, which the government has spoken about, right? Particularly for women in midlife, that they want to get back into the workforce. Eleanor, you've coined the term queenagers. I love that word. What are we missing, or what is that employer that perhaps thinks they prefer cheaper, younger staff missing?
Well, I think it's totally true that within the workplace, what the column in the iPaper says is true. And our research shows very clearly that particularly gendered ageism, which is where ageism hits sexism, is a really big thing for women that can take women over 50 like twice as long to find a job. We found that from SmartWorks, who help women back into work, and that 50%, women are 50% more likely than men to report being patronised, ignored and dismissed at work. And we also see within our Noon community a big epidemic of what I call the whacking, which
what
is...
What do you call it?
The whacking, which is that when women hit kind of 50, it's amazing how quickly they get exited from their jobs. I was a very big editor on the Sunday Times for 23 years. Just before I turned 50, I got whacked, and so did 5 other senior women at the same time. And across the media...
And of course, I don't have the Sunday Times to talk about their reasons for that, but you're talking about it from personal experience.
Yeah, but I'm also talking about it as a systemic thing across corporate life, that once women hit about 50, they're seen as being rather less pleasing, both in terms of being like maybe physically pleasing, but also a bit more bolshy and more likely to speak back because you've got 30 years of experience.
Not going to be as compliant, perhaps.
Not as compliant, not as pleasing, which is very much what the corporate world has always wanted from women.
But of course, there is always, from diversity, you can create a better workplace. Lucy, you talk about it being a critical moment for midlife workers. How do you think they can ensure their value is recognised? I love some of the tips that you have in the book.
Good. Well, hopefully that encourages a few more people to read it as well. So thank you. I think the main thing that people need to do is to take control and be proactive in this scenario. I don't think anyone is ready to advocate on anyone else's behalf, certainly in terms of their age. So unless we recognise it and understand the value that it brings, that's for us to articulate. Don't expect other people to go looking for that.
Can I throw out the first one, accept change? So we have to be more flexible or adaptable. But what about this one? Swallow your ego.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. I'd say I can help most people, but there's about 38% of people I can't.
38, that's very specific, Lucy.
That's actually approximate and entirely anecdotal. So that's based on my experience. We support about sort of 200 to 300 people a year. And the ones who come to me saying things like, I've been a senior partner for the last 10, 15 years. I've got all these qualifications, and approach it with an attitude of, I would describe it as entitlement. I deserve this. I should be getting this. And I turn around and I think, well, the job market isn't going to support that. It's really difficult why is that going to make me want to pay you that particular salary? The thing that's going to make me pay is when somebody recognizes my problem, evidences how they're going to help me solve it, brings value to the door, whether that's clients, whether that's new pipeline of business, whether it's new customer acquisition, I don't know. But unless you're actually proving that worth, it's very hard to make those demands.
Eleanor, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say here, there's a brilliant piece of research from Lucy Ryan, who's written a book called The Revolt, which is about why women leave their jobs in their 50s and 60s. She finds that 70% of women at this point want to power up their career. And we're not going to get our pensions till we're 67. So in terms of women living longer and having a pension pay gap of 30%, it's really important that women go on working in their 50s if we're not going to have a real economic problem. There is a real problem with the way that companies look at women's careers. They're not looking at us at 50 and going, this is a woman on the verge of her best decade ever. And they should be, because actually a third of the workforce is now over 50, and that's only going to get bigger. We're living in an aging society, a longevity society. I called my company Noon, because in the 100-year life, 50 is only halfway through. It's lunchtime. I see so many women moving into absolutely their best act. But I do think that whatever you've been doing between about 25 and 50, that circle comes to an end. But rather than seeing that as the end of our lives, we need to see that as the beginning of the next circle, like a figure of 8. So in some ways, I'm really with Lucy that I think we need to be swallowing our ego, reskilling, getting ourselves out there. But there is a real gendered ageism problem in the culture where women are not seen as dynamic forces at 50 plus in the way that we should be.
But I want to go back to another of Lucy's tips, which was don't get too hung up on gendered ageism. Tell us what this is, Lucy, do the so what test.
In terms of answering somebody else, so if somebody's looking at me and I've got a load of things on my CV, strong communicator, able to manage a large team, the question that the person reading that wants to have answered is, so what? So you're a good communicator, so you've managed a large team. What is that actually going to do for me? So things along the lines of, I can take your most difficult employee and I can turn them into your best performer. Or I can communicate any message to whatever audience you're wanting and I guarantee a 20% uplift. And if I don't, put me on probation. It's that sort of qualification that I think makes this demographic, who people do see as a risk for all the sorts of systemic problems that there are. We deal with the world as it is, not the way we want it to be. So we acknowledge that. And then we think, right, how do we proactively address the problems likely to be presented and come up? And I think you open the door to that, you open the door to dialogue.
Let me read this message. I've got quite a few coming in. I've been looking for a job for 18 months. I'm 60. I have a master's, highest level of HR qualifications, 25 years experience. You can't take dates off CVs because most employers have HR systems that you're forced to use to apply for jobs with dates as required fields. Lying would be deception and disqualifying your application. My CV is usually dismissed by AI with no human ever seeing it. Eleanor.
Yeah, that is really true. We run a jobs board at Noon, which tries to help women into jobs because they're hitting such problems with the AI. And we hear so many stories of women sending off hundreds, thousands applications and not getting through. But what's interesting is there are some specialist recruiters who, say, for instance, get women back into law. And they often find that women who've been knocked out by the AI algorithm are then actually get jobs with the law firms. So there's a systemic problem here that sometimes the dates in your CV can that you're excluded for something which actually you'd be brilliant for. And I think we really need a rethink within our culture about what women, particularly particularly are for 50 plus. And we need to see that this is actually a real opportunity. For many of us, we've done our child raising or a lot of our caring responsibilities by the time we hit 50. And we've actually got the space. And I see so many women going, if not now, when? I've always wanted to do this thing. I can do it at 50. I've got the health span. And we're all going to live a lot longer. But companies need to rethink how they perceive us, that actually we've probably got another 15, 20 years of really good work.
So this is, Eleanor, I think you're saying to the employer, rethink your hiring practices when using AI, as opposed to a way to beat the AI.
I think that all recruiters, and particularly recruiters within companies, need to think really clearly about that statistic that a third of the workforce is over 50. So they're also missing out on some excellent talent if they aren't looking at this demographic. And also, when it comes to AI, everyone's very frightened about jobs and there's quite a lot of evidence now which shows that AI actually needs older workers. The hallucination within the AI requires somebody to look at it who knows that 95% of it is great, but 5% is really wrong. And that experience and wisdom, that inner knowledge, is in the older worker. And I think that we have judgment, and we've been around the block. We've seen a lot of things before, which is really helpful, and much better consumer awareness. And if you think that actually 92% of all household consumer spending decisions are being made by women, 50 plus, they're a really important demographic to be selling to.
Being 50, says another, and working, I've never felt more powerful or wise. This is the change that my mother's generation was talking about. I don't think it was physical, but a spiritual change of perspective on life. So somebody very happy in the workplace there. Lucy, for someone who's listening now feeling maybe stuck or rejected, what would you give them as the first practical steps to take this morning?
I would say listen to what Eleanor has said to a large extent, which is people can be applying for hundreds, thousands of jobs. So I'd say stop. Recruitment is broken for people over 50. So why keep banging your head against a brick wall that isn't willing to listen? We know there are systemic problems, but in my experience, the more that you shout at companies and say things like, be more open-minded to people over 50, they just go, so what? So what? Where's the business case? Where's the commercial case? So I think it's a more helpful perspective to sort of say to the individual, actually, you're going to have to figure this out for yourself. And the way that I would encourage people to do that is a number of different things. The first thing is be really clear on the kind of role and the sort of organisation that you want to work for, because that drives all of the action you're going to be taking. If you're not clear, you are going to be applying to 300 different roles, lots of organisations, you'll be getting rejected from all of them. And I guarantee that's going to be that's going to annihilate your mental health, constant ghosting and rejections. So to get clear, the way that you get clear is through actions. So if I look at all of the people that we look at within our community, everyone finds the work and they're sort of the place that they're happy in because of the experiments, the shadowing, the work experience, proof projects that they're offering. So that means go to organisations that you like the look of, ask to do job shadowing, pay for it if you have to. Yeah, I know that sounds quite controversial. Offer up free work experience, because our demographic, we prove ourselves in the relationships. We don't prove ourselves by the CV that we know is going to get rejected. So serve somebody. Think of who you can help. Who are the beneficiaries? Who do you actually want to spend some time? If there's a startup out there you really like the look of, you can power that startup up and you can think about ways that you can negotiate earning something from the value that you are going to generate, because I know you're going to generate it. I would say...
And I think obviously doing free work experience or shadowing or paying for it, obviously if you're in a good financial position, which won't be everybody. One more tip and then I have to let you go.
Target organisations likely to want you. You know, the reality is getting a job as a social media manager for a student nightclub is probably not going to be your way.
I'll throw that challenge out to my listeners. I have a feeling somebody will be able to do it. Lucy Standing, her book is called Age Against the Machine, New Rules for Working in an Ageist World, and Eleanor Mills runs the website Noon. Really interesting. Thank you both.